Hey, good evening, everyone. This is Big Bill coming to you live from the YouTube Model Builders channel. Today is May 15th, 2018. It says May 16th on our thing. Is it Wednesday?
Wednesday.
Oh, see what happens when you're retired? See what happens when you're retired? You forget about time, date, everything. Life is just one extended vacation. But anyway, welcome to the May 16, 2018 show of YouTube Model Builders Into the Locomotive Shop with good guest and good friend, Joe Desmond from Central Jersey, Conrail and N-Scale. Before we get to tonight's topic, I just want to do some homework and some housekeeping here. On Thursday, that's tomorrow, right, Joe? That usually follows Wednesday, and then it goes into Thursday. So tomorrow's Thursday, May 17th. We'll have Johnny's Model Train Talk Show. That's a live panel, more or less, where everybody can join in, and then we put a link up where you can go and join in the panel discussion and have fun, talk about model railroading and anything else that is the topic of the evening. It's usually model railroad related. Usually in the last couple of weeks I've joined in. From watching it as a spectator, it's been pretty interesting. So I would suggest you guys, keep that on your calendar. It's every week, every Thursday with John. It's Johnny's Model Train Talk, and it's on 8 p.m. Central Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. 9 p.m. Central Time, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. That's our late night one because that's for after the kids go to bed. That's the adult one. So, and then on Tuesday, May 22nd, we'll have Workbench to Mainline with Ralph Renzetti. He's another good friend of YouTube Model Builder, and an excellent modeler, and does an excellent weathering. And so he'll be on, and he'll be doing his mainline to his Workbench to Mainline series, which has been pretty successful. And let's see. Oh, yeah, here's something new and different that John has come up with, and I helped collaborate. He came up with the idea, and we kind of knocked it around. On the 29th of May, that's a Thursday, we're going to start a new show. I know you guys know that 2017, John's laughing in the background. You can't hear him, I can. But we finished the live show in 2017, and now in 2018, John and I were kicking around some ideas, and then we came upon this one, and John really kind of hatched it. And the show's going to air on the 29th of this month, May, and it's going to be called Who is Big Bill Talking To? And basically what we're going to do is we're going to try to get people in the hobby, anybody and everybody who's doing something different or new, and we're going to have them on the show. At least we're going to try to get them on the show. I know that I told you in 2017 with the live show, it was hard to get people to commit and to, get into, coming on the show. But what we've decided to do is it's not going to be a regular show every month. It's not going to be dedicated like, okay, on the 29th of every month, or the end of the month, it's going to be Who's Big Bill Talking To? So you put on your calendar. It's going to be a random kind of thing, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to get some people on. I'm in touch with Lionel Strand, who I asked if he would be on the 29th, and he said he would. I'm in contact with him, and we're going to see if he'll be on. And then afterwards, I've sent emails out to other people, and basically just kind of have like a one-on-one interview with that one particular person in regards to their modeling and what they've done in the train hobby and stuff like that. And it's not going to be necessary to so-called big names in the hobby. It's going to be for, whatever we see or ever who's in the hobby doing something that's different. I'm in touch with this other guy named Larry Ryan. Let me see if I got that name right. I don't want to mispronounce it, and I'm only going to take a few minutes on this. I have his card here. And Larry, I met up in Larry Ryan. Larry, I met up in Amherst, and he's a three-rail guy and O-Scout. And we don't get a lot of O-Scout guys here. So I'm in touch with him, and I'm going to see if I can get the gentleman, Mike O'Connell from Chooch on. I know I'm saying this and it's being recorded. These guys don't even know. But I'm trying. I'm going to reach out to them and see. I got some ideas from some of you guys had sent me emails and told me. So look for that in the future. May 29th is going to be our kickoff date. That's a Tuesday, May 29th. And the new show is going to be called Who is Big Bill Talking To? And that's how we're going to go with the format. Now, it's not going to, like I said, it's not going to be every month. So we're going to, set it up and try to make it as interesting as possible. Okay, so that's just that. And that's just basically the homework we wanted to take care of. Tonight we have Joe Desmond Into the Locomotive Shop. And tonight's show is Joe's going to be doing an SD60M patch locomotive with an ESU decoder. We're going to be doing some painting techniques, some decals, taking them off, putting them on. And also, we're going to focus on some milling of the chassis. Some of you guys have been asking about that. I've inquired to Joe on his channel and through emails to him. So Joe's going to do that. So welcome, Joe.
Hi, Bill.
How's first and foremost, how's everything going, Joe?
Oh, I couldn't be happier. How's everything with you, buddy?
Well, thank you for asking. I thought you'd never ask. No, everything here is good on this end. We had a bit of a hurricane, not a hurricane, but we had a severe thunderstorm here yesterday in New York. Did you get affected by it?
Yeah, we got. We're up at work. We were real busy, and come home last night. We had a lot of thunder. I was watching the news today at lunchtime, and I saw all the roofs got blown off up there in Brooklyn or whatever.
Yeah, Staten Island, we had a tree that actually came down upon in the neighborhood. A big, very old oak tree crushed somebody's car. Thank God, no, there was nobody in it. So, but yeah, we had.
Hey, that show sounds awesome. I can't wait to watch it.
Yes, I think it's going to be pretty good. John and I have been knocking that around. John came up with the title, and and we kind of like been, tinkering with it and sending out emails and replies, and so hopefully it's going to work out. Hopefully, it's going to be good. I'm looking forward to it.
I am too. I'm going to watch it.
Yeah. So tonight's show, Joe, what do we? I explained a little bit, but you can get more into detail with it.
So if you remember back in November, I had a lot of things going on, and I messed up that locomotive, and that was my buddy Andy's locomotive. So I decided tonight to revisit that and let's fix it and get it done. I also made a promise to him that I was going to upgrade it. So instead of just doing a Digitrack soundboard, I decided let's do the ESU. So I'm going to take you step by step of how we were able to salvage this shell that was essentially ruined with that bad paint. And I'm going to take you through that process. And the other thing was I got a lot of comments on the thread from last show and also through my channel and my Facebook page, a lot of people wanting to see the actual cutting of the frame to get the room for the decoder, because I guess my hands were blocking or I edits and stuff. So I paid real close attention to that this time for everyone so you can see how we did it.
Good. Good. Now, if I remember correctly, the paint job became I'm not going to say you botched it up, but the paint job.
No, I botched it. You can say it.
Okay, you botched. I didn't want to go there. But it was a botched paint job. And what happened to the paint? What
happened was I was trying to be a little tricky and do something cool for November's show. And my favorite weathering paint that I used to use was Full Quill Dust. And I had a little bit left. And I tried to reconstitute it with alcohol and water, and it was a big mistake. So it the shell looks like, when we get the video rolling, you'll see it looks like it came out of an Arctic snowstorm in Alaska.
Oh, right. That's what I remember. It kind of powdered up.
Yeah, it just looked really, really
clouded up, actually. You think that was due to the alcohol mix?
I think the paint had been so old because I think it was somewhere like, I looked at the manufacturer date. I think it was like 5 or 6 years old, and it had been, there was only like a little bit left, and it was really thick on the bottom, and I should never have even tried it.
That's like eating gasoline sushi, you know?
Yeah, exactly. You're glutton for punishment. So I think it's a lesson learned out there for everybody is if it doesn't look good, just don't even try.
I definitely would, you know, that when you, how did you have to get the cap off? Did you have to use channel locks? That would be first.
Actually, no. We have those kitchen scissors with the grips.
Yes.
So I had to use that to pry it open. That should have been the number one indicator.
That would have been my first clue as to. But then you go see. Then what happens is you get it off, and then you say you look in it, right? I bet you this is what you were thinking with the little stirrer. You were going, it don't look that bad.
Exactly. I'm like, I can make this work. We can do this.
I can do this. I can do anything. All right. All right. So, hey, listen, that's why they put erasers at the end of pencils, buddy.
Yes, that is. And it's a lesson learned. Luckily, I absorbed the pain so that we can show everybody out there, don't make my mistake.
Exactly right. Exactly.
When you see it, it's bad.
That's what this show, welcome to Catastrophe Railroad. Amen and amen. All right, let's move forward with this.
All right, so without further ado, one quick thing I want to go over is I didn't put the stats up for the SD60M because I think the last couple videos I put those stats up. So, you know, the Conrail had a bunch of them. And, by the owner's request, he wanted it patched out for CSX. So you can kind of say I'm not doing a Conrail locomotive, even though I'm kind of. But so it's going to be patched out in CSX numbers, and I didn't put any of the data in there, so I don't recall how many units Conrail bought of the SD60, even though I know that they bought quite a few. So, all right, let's roll it. All right, so the first thing we're going to get doing here is let's take a look at this shell. I mean, you can see it just was ruined. But I wanted to try and save it, and I thought the best way to do it is let's just go ahead and strip it. And what I did is I disassembled it. I took the walkways and the cab off. Now, I opted not to strip the walkways and handrails because I didn't want to get messing with that. The other thing was the cab. I didn't want to strip the cab because of that anti-glare black paint on the front. I didn't want to mess with that. So we're going to put those aside and we'll revisit those later. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my my shell, I'm going to put it in a plastic container, and then we're going to use some 91% isopropyl alcohol. And I'm just going to pretty much fill it so that it's covering the shell. And what I do then is I let it sit. I thought I was going to have to leave it sit for a day or two, but I went to work, and by the time I came home from work on the night shift, the paint was already flaking off. So it came off pretty quickly. And that was about maybe 12 to 15 hours of soak time. So we get all of our alcohol in there. And then we're going to use a toothbrush, and we're going to just scrub it, and it comes right off. The alcohol is really good because it attacks the paint and the decals, but it does not attack the plastic. And that's a big key right there is you don't want to use any of these lacquer thinners or anything like that because you will melt that plastic and it'll dissolve. So once I got it cleaned, I went to and scrubbed it really good with soap and water, rinsed it and dried it for let it dry all day. And now we're going to come in here. I'm using AccuFlex gray primer, and I'm going to put a nice even coat all the way around. Now, with this, what you have to realize about primer is to give you the tooth for the paint. And you don't have to worry about actual coverage of the color per se, because the color is really just a tint to make you be able to see that you have an even coverage. It's not necessarily like you're trying to get a good color coating, if you understand what I'm saying. So don't concentrate so much on that. Just make sure you get a nice even coverage to have a base coat for your paint?
Well, the primer is basically, yeah, the primer is basically, like you said, the tooth. The primer is like the Velcro.
Correct.
The paint is what it is. I noticed that if you use a darker primer, like say if you're going to paint your engines red, if it's a darker primer, it makes the red jump out a little bit more.
Correct. And the other thing I was taught when I was painting is you use opposite color primers. If you're using, say, a blue or a black or a dark color, you want to use a light color primer.
Right,
and
correct.
Then the inverse is the same. If you're using a light color top coat, like a white or a yellow, you want to use a dark color primer, like an oxide red. And
right.
It helps the color pop, but it helps you see even coverage.
Right, correct.
So when you have a nice even coverage of your paint, you won't see that primer bleeding through. And you'll see as we get into the paint color, you'll see what I'm talking about in all the edges and the fan grills and stuff.
Okay.
All right. Go ahead. Let's roll it. So the primer went on really well, nice and dry. So now I'm going to set up with some AccuFlex Conrail Blue, and I'm going to start painting. Now, you notice I just constantly move my brush around. I'm varying my paint flow with my internal mix lever. So even though I'm moving it, I don't stop moving, even though there's paint may or may not be spraying. And I'm constantly moving the piece so that I make sure that I get all those nooks and crannies and edges. The other thing is when I'm spraying, I'm at a distance and I'm spraying so that by the time it hits, it may be just a tad bit wet, but within a very short amount of time, it looks dry already. I think that's the best way to avoid orange peeling. If you glob that paint on there and you have heavy coats, especially in N-scale, you're going to get that orange peel effect. And the other thing is you're going to start obscuring detail. So I think this technique of making sure you're at a distance from your workpiece that when you spray, by the time it hits, it's almost dry and it dries within seconds. You're
kind of like you're kind of like throwing the paint on it.
Correct. And it's almost like you're just spraying dry paint on there the way you kind of, not really, but the other thing is I'm making sure to check all these angles if I'm moving this piece all around on my paper towel holder, because there's areas like under the radiator grills that the paint wasn't getting into. So that's the key when you're putting your base color on. Okay. So as you can see, it's a nice even coat. Little bit of orange peel on the long hood, but it wasn't too much that I was concerned about. Go ahead and pause it right here, please. So now, time has elapsed now. It's 24 hours later. I've made sure that the paint has dried enough time. I like Corey Gravino's way of thinking. Until you don't smell the paint anymore, that's a good indication that the paint is dry. Now, when we get ready for our decals, what you have to realize is for your decals, you really need a nice smooth surface. So this AccuFlex paint really doesn't gloss up too well. So this next step here is what I'm doing is I'm spraying a clear coat, AccuFlex Clear Coat Gloss, so I can have a nice base for my decals. Anything yet, Bill?
When spray painting, are imperfections in the undercoat covered up, or do you have to sand? That's from Dwight from Northern Star Railroad Lines.
In a small piece like this locomotive, my personal preference, in my humble opinion, is if you have small imperfections in your paint, barring paint runs, like a little orange peel or my personal opinion is skip it. Leave it. I don't think it's worth the aggravation because you're going to be putting decals, you're going to be putting weathering. As long as the paint is smooth for the decals, that's key, and you don't have any big, long runs, I would leave it and cover it with weathering, my personal opinion. Now, if you're working with a larger piece, an O scale, HO scale, a big building, and you have paint runs or imperfection, I would sand it down and respray. That's my 2 cents.
Okay.
Okay. All right, go ahead, roll it. So we're going to start spraying our gloss coat on. Again, when you're doing the gloss coat, Don't try when you're doing this finishing stuff like this. Multiple coats that are too thin is better than one heavy coat, because when you have that heavy coat, that's when you're going to get your runs and severe orange peeling. So the best way, if you notice, I'm just doing real light 2 or 3 passes. Heavy coat, that's when you're going to get your runs and severe.
That's my problem. Sorry. That's
okay. So now I'm going to put it in the booth on the turntable. Pause it here. I'm going to put it in the booth in the turntable, and I'll let it sit overnight. Let it. In fact, I don't even touch it for like till this. I think I let it for 2 days almost to get it nice and dry. And now what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and start working on the frame itself. Go ahead, roll it. So with this frame, the frame was good. We tested it last time. It ran fine. So I wasn't concerned about having to reassemble it for testing. So I just got into it and started disassembling it. Now, when we went to go put this ESU decoder in, I took everything out of the chassis. I gutted it. I took out the motor frame, the axles. I did not mess with the pickups because they were kind of glued in, so I didn't want to pull them out. So I left those in place. Now, you'll notice when I first start doing my measurements and stuff, I keep the little nylon spacers in there just so I can get the good measurements. But then when I start doing milling, is I take everything out, all that little plastic stuff, because I don't want it to melt and get distorted. Because when doing this work, I only do it with a Dremel tool. You build up some heat in this chassis, and I don't want to melt these parts.
That makes sense. Yeah, Dwight says, yes, paint has to cure, not just dry.
Yeah. Thank you, Dwight. So now, what I've done is, this board is an old ESU board that I blew up. So I didn't throw it away. I kept this in my box for mock-up. So what I do is I use this to test fit, so I know where I got to take my make my cuts. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here with a black Sharpie marker, and I'm going to mark out, because if you notice on the front edge there, where my left hand is, that top rail needs to be cut back to make room for all those capacitors. So that's what we're going to be. So you can see that forward of those 2 black marks, we got to remove all that material. Also, what we have to do is we have to cut a groove on the inside of that rail for the decoder to fit in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clamp this. Now, when you're clamping these chassis, very important, don't Wookie tighten your vise down on this thing, because you will distort this chassis and you'll ruin it. It's very light. And I'll show you how light it is. Watch when I start cutting with the Dremel tool. You'll see that the vibrations cause the vise to loosen up, and I have to reclamp it. So you can see I'm not tightening this thing very, very much at all, because you will deform this chassis and then it's ruined. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start making these cuts with this this Dremel tool. Now, don't push this Dremel tool too hard, because you'll make too much friction, too much heat in this chassis, and you'll start overheating this chassis. The other thing is I do is occasionally I touch it with my fingers. If it's too hot to touch, I'm going to stop and let it cool off. Now, important safety tip, boys and girls, coming up here. After I just check the chassis, it's not too hot. You need to be very cautious when you're using these tools. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to remove this material.
Adult supervision is recommended?
Yes.
Also, is that the...
Bam, right there.
I was just going to say.
Be cognizant and aware of this when you're doing this mill work. You know, point your tool away from you. I'm not going to joke around. I'm wearing glasses right now because you got metal bits flying around. And hey, this is mono-rariting, guys. I don't want to lose an eyeball over this stuff. So I'm cutting a groove on the inside. I've separated the 2 halves now, and I'm going to cut that groove along there, because that's where the decoder has to tuck into that groove to make contact, so that we can get our electrical contact from the frame halves. So as we're doing this, we're checking for heat. I'm doing this by eye. I'm not doing any measurements. I'm not using a CNC machine or anything like that. I'm going step by step and I'm checking as I go to make sure that it's fitting. Because don't forget, you can always take it off, but you can't put it back on. So if you cut too deep, it's
Very
ruined.
true. Very true. Measure twice, cut once.
Correct. So now I've test fit that board and I found a little problem. There was a little circuit chip on the bottom side that was bumping on the chassis, and I didn't like the way it was laying in there. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to remove a little material off the front edge here like this. And that's it. This is pretty much all the work we had to do this chassis. And I think this is a great starter project for anybody who's never done this, because it's very simple. It's not a lot of work. This only took me a morning. I had a cup of coffee and breakfast. And then I got down here and I was done by lunchtime. As you can see, it's fitting in perfectly. It's nice. The chassis has made up good. There's no bowing or anything like that. So now the final thing, what I like to do is I come in here with a grinder and I smooth everything out. I don't want any burrs, especially on the outside edges, because you don't want that burrs getting stuck on the shell when you're trying to put it in there.
Good point.
So I'm just going to file it down nice and smooth. Be careful. Don't push this too hard because you don't want to take off too much material. We want as much weight in this chassis as we can. And then I come back, my own little thing. I like to polish it off and just make it look nice.
I like your idea. I like your eye for detail, Joe, because basic and also the finished product here. No one is ever going to see the inside of this shell,
right?
And the fact that you take the time to be meticulous about cleaning it up and then shining it up, it shows the in my opinion, the passion for it. If you're going to do the job, do it right through.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I always think ahead. What if I got to get into this chassis? What if I got to pull a shell off? If there's burrs and it's going to make everything a mess, so I'm going to take that extra time.
Yeah, exactly.
So now we got our chassis milled. As you can see, it really wasn't that bad. And so now we're going to get ready to start reassembling and installing our decoder. And all this time, our shell is still in the booth curing. I like that, Dwight. Curing. I'm going to use that. So we're going to be using the Digitrax Oval. I think I've adopted that. I really like this speaker. I ran into some problems with the Zemo speaker on the ST50 that we did. The adhesive where the speaker box mounts to the speaker itself is coming undone and it buzzes. What was that, Bill?
No, I just went,
So I found these Digitrax ovals are super nice. They got just as much definition, in my opinion, for in scale. I think it's more reliable of a speaker. It doesn't vibrate and stuff. So I'm just going to go ahead with all these Digitrax ovals. I really like them, and they're cheap. They're $10. Here we are. I'm not getting in depth with this again because I'm probably boring you with the seeing me work on the trucks every time. We went ahead with some Kato wheel sets again for Andy. I think they're just a much smoother running wheel set, and they got better electrical contact. So I really have adopted these. So now we're going to put everything and button it all back up, make sure it all goes back together. The only thing I should have done on this chassis that I didn't is I probably should have shortened up them speaker wires a little bit. They were a little too long. So that's probably a little lesson learned for next time. Again, with these screws, don't forget, everyone, when you're putting it back together, you don't have to over tighten it because it has a tendency to squeeze that chassis, and it'll hold the bearings, the plastic bearings, too tight, and then it won't run as smooth. So just tight enough is all you need. And we're all buttoned back up there. I'm going to my pickups were stuck under the truck here, and we're going to call this finito. And What I didn't record this time was the programming. We put it up on the program track using the ESU, the Loc Sound programmer. And I downloaded the file from their website and reprogrammed the chassis number. All right, pause it here. Anything so far, Bill?
No, nothing yet. Nobody's chimed in on anything. I just find it interesting that you took the time to make sure everything was buttoned up correctly. And I could see where you said about the long wire for the sound box. Yeah, I could see where you'd want to shorten that up.
Yeah, putting it back together was a little too tight, I think. But I kind of just left it. The shell does go on. It's just a little tight when you squeeze it. It would have probably made it fit a lot better. Right. The other thing I'm gonna we'll briefly touch upon it this time, but we'll go more in depth next time. Is like the LED problem. I solved that for the headlight. I went with some surface mount LEDs on this chassis, so we'll touch on that. So that was another wire that's in the chassis. You'll see on button up that you got to contend with. So here we're getting ready to start our decal work. So I went online. I downloaded some prototype photos. I got these from, I think they were railfanpicture.net of the patched unit. But it was a little early. I think these pictures were 2000, 2002. From what my research shows that pretty much CSX had painted their Conrail blues out by, I think, 2008 or 9-ish. I could be wrong on the date. I got to look at my notes.
Joe, before we go any further, Brian W. wants to know, what speed were you running the Dremel at when you were doing the milling?
Brian, I was running it at about 8,000 RPMs, I think it is, the number 8 setting on the variable. And I didn't crank it up all the way because the thing just vibrates like crazy. So when you're at that high speed, though, you got to watch them. I'm only using little cutoff discs because I had a diamond dust wheel that was really good for this work, but I kind of dulled it out. And I got to go buy a new one. So probably should have looked at that before we started the work. But we're using 3 decal sets for this. I'm using all microscale decals. We're using the CSX patch numbers. It's actually a patch set that they do. It's for multiple roads. The color was right, but after putting it on, I think the graphic wasn't totally proper. It could have been. I probably should have found another set. But so we use the CSX patch set. We're using the Conrail Altoona painted locomotives set. I think it's like 98 or 2000 or something like that. So, or no, 94 to 98, I think it was. And then the third one is the Conrail data set to get a bunch of like warning tags and stuff. So I just go ahead and get all my paperwork organized and get set up. And so you can roll the tape now. I'm using bottled water. I didn't have any demineralized water, so I just figured, hey, I'll just use some bottled water. It's got to be clean enough, I think. And what I'm talking about is you don't want to use straight tap water because you have a tendency to stain the decals with tap water and release some mineral deposits. So kind of be cognizant of that. The tools I'm just using a nice clean soft brush, a pair of tweezers, a brand new X-Acto blade, and some micro saw. I like the micro solvent to soften the decals and get them to lay down flat on the locomotive. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just start cutting out my logos. Here is a big key point: is you'll want to have these prototype photos. You want to have these drawings when you're doing this, because if you look, I mean, the way they label it, it reads from left to right Conrail quality, and the Conrail quality Q is on the right-hand side or the rear of the long hood, and this is for the conductor side of the locomotive. And when you flip it over, the Conrail quality Q is to the forward end of the long hood on the locomotive, on the engineer side, and it reads Conrail quality that way. So it gets confusing. And at one point, I thought that I put them on backwards. But so that's what I'm just saying. Before you get into this, make sure you have all your photos and stuff in front of you so you don't make that critical mistake because if you make that mistake, we got to, take them off before, and they may rip and all that. So to avoid the problem, just be ready to go. So I'm getting it lined up, and now I'm getting these little data labels. They're teeny tiny. And you know what? I actually like working with the smaller decals myself than the bigger ones. They're like super resilient. I didn't have to worry about ripping them and all that stuff. So now we're on the engineer side. As you can see, like I said, the Conrail Q is on the opposite way. So it kind of it plays with your mind and you start getting confused. So it's really good to have the pictures.
Good time not to start drinking.
Yeah. Now I'm going to put these are those ones that say, like danger or high voltage and stuff. I'm just putting them. I'm using my reference photos as best as I could to put them in some spots. There was a couple spots on this say that there may not be prototypical. I had to speculate because I couldn't get the right angle to see what was where. But unless you're going to use a 10 power magnification, I don't think you're going to be able to read it anyway.
If somebody comes to your house with a 10 power magnifying device, definitely do not let them through the front door. That's just me. That's just me.
Well, I do say this in all seriousness. I do say this because if you're going to be doing any photography work and you're going to be doing it up close and the macro scale, some of these decals will start to be legible in the macro scale photography. So that's why you kind of want to try and make sure you don't get it all messed up.
The beauty of putting this micro scale, the red bottle, as I call it,
yep,
is that once you put that brush on that, you just leave it, because what that does is that it pushes it down onto the model. And
yes.
Once it dries, it looks as though it's actually been painted on through the rivets. And
okay, pause it right here, please. Go ahead, Bill. Finish your thought.
It actually kind of just settles into the model itself and adheres to the lines on the engine doors and over the rivets. So it looks like it's actually been, painted on.
Yeah. So what I've found, and you can chime in at any time, Bill, because I know you've done this too, is with my process of doing the decals is I will put the water, get it in where I want it, and let it dry and lay down. Then once it looks dry, that's when I come in and paint my solvent over top. You don't want to mix them, because then it dilutes the solvent and it doesn't work.
Right.
And then lay the solvent down. Only do one coat, because it starts to get tacky right away, and you don't want to be brushing over that decals because you'll rip them or ruin them.
Right.
Do one nice coat and then let that sit and dry. And then the microscale tells you that even though it's dry, it's still going to be working its magic. It's going to be making it suck down and fall into all those little grooves. So don't play with it. Don't touch it. So just let it sit. Any thoughts, Bill?
No, not yet. No, but everybody's just...
No, I was saying thoughts on what I said. That's all.
Oh, thoughts on what you said. No, I think you're absolutely right. I do it a little bit... we do it the same, but we do it a little differently. I kind of like, I make sure that even if it's painted and I haven't repainted it, I always make sure that the model, the train or the caboose or whatever I'm decaling for my road name, I always make sure that I wash them, with a good, with Dawn.
Oh, yes.
Mild soap, get all the oils and whatever off them, and then, let it set. And the thing about this is, I know you're doing it in the video form, and it's, you're doing it right after another, but these were taken in a series of days, because I know that you've talked about that. So the thing here is exercising is patience, because when you do that, like if I'm preparing, and I'm sure the same is for you, if you're preparing the model, you have to give it time to dry, because usually what we want to do is hurry up. We don't want to hurry up and wait. We want to hurry up and get it done. And then that's where the mistakes come in. And that's where you wind up doing, as my grandfather said, you want to work smart.
Right.
So you have to do all the prep work prior to it. So, but all the prep work like you've done, it kind of like pans itself out at the end, because you get a quality finished model, and you kind of surprise yourself at it. So take your time doing all this work, prep work, and whatever it has to be done, whether it's masking or getting it stripped and ready. Like you said in the beginning, when you stripped it with the alcohol, usually 24 hours, but you said when you came back from your work that it was that, and that was like 17, 18 hours later. So, it wasn't like 15 minutes, go upstairs, get a cup of coffee, come down, and it's, ready to go.
Yes. And thank you for mentioning that, because you're right. It is a step-by-step process. You've got to take your time if you want a good quality model to come out. And there's no rush. This should take a couple days to get to this point.
There's no quick fix solution.
Correct. All right. So while we're on this picture, I stopped it here on purpose. So at this point in the project, I had opted not to repaint the cab because there's a lot of cab detail that Atlas was nice enough to paint for us. The window frames, that anti-glare strip. I really didn't want to get messing around with that. The cab really wasn't all that bad. However, if you look in this shot, you can see that there is a color differentiation. The cab color is more of a violet base, where the AccuFlex is more, I'm going to say, on the lighter side. So, well, I didn't want to stress about it. I consulted with the owner and asked his opinion, and I told him flat out, if you don't like it, tell me, I will repaint it. And he looked at it. I also got in a couple other opinions, and everybody, with the consensus of the opinion was that it was so slight that it didn't matter. And if you look here, this is under the light here, that the camera that we're using, so it's like super bright. When I took it outside, you could barely notice. So I thought about it overnight, and I said, you know what? We're not going to stress, because we can blend this with weathering. It's not that bad.
Everything can be fixed with weathering.
Yes, I think it could be. At this point, I'm confident that I could fix this with weathering. So I talked to the owner, and he said, yes, let's do it. So I proceeded on. So I got all the cab numbers are all done. I wasn't too happy with this cab decal set, because it has it's a stencil. If you look at the pictures, they're more of a painted format. So I was a little like, I don't know why Microscale bills that as a repatch for CSX. I don't think it's the proper font. But again, the owner was like, no, I like it, go with it.
I have a few statements here from William. William, I can't pronounce your last name, buddy, and I'm not even going to. Arsnil?
Arsnu, I believe he said.
He says that he prefers a Walters Solver set. And Nathan DeLay said, Joe, it would be cool if you did on your layout a preserved steam locomotive running on your layout for a tourist train.
That is on the list of things to do, Nathan. Otto Betcher.
Yes. Otto Betcher says, not my ex-wife. I don't know what that means, but
it makes me laugh. Okay, so with that being said, we know the color differentiation problem, so we're going to proceed on. And what we're going to do now is go ahead and roll it. I'm inspecting it for any glaring problems. I don't see anything bad. The decals came out really good. I got the cab numbers. I had to do the cab numbers individually, so I had to take my time to get them lined up. Now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to seal the decals. I think this is a very important step that a lot of people skip. And I come in here with the AccuFlex clear coat matte. And I was hoping it was going to be kind of like a dull coat, and it didn't really flatten out very much. It was still a little glossy. So what I had to do, and I did it off camera, I apologize I didn't get it on camera, is I had to go get some Tester's dull coat and dull coat it to get the shine off.
Well, William says also, as a weathering base, I overspray the entire engine or car with a satin clear, no matter how dirty the prototype it is still shiny underneath.
Wow, I never thought of that. That's high level. I like that.
Yeah.
Our snow. Oh, sorry,
Awesome.
William.
Okay, thank you, William. And Otto Bettinger, about the weathering and his ex-wife. It's about the weathering.
Gotcha. So now I got the whole unit assembled. I got the walkways back in. We got the cab in. I'm going to go in and I touched up the grills and did that black so that it shines, so that it gives it some depth. And I'm going to go in here and we're going to get our weathering powders and I'm going to blend in that cab. And I kind of took this as being, it was a little beat up. Not all of that weathering came off on the handrails and stuff. So I'm going with this as kind of like it's last days in Conrail dress blues. So I kind of made it real grubby looking, and it helped hide the color.
You know what I've learned from our good friend, the Mudfather.
What's that?
AKA Ralph Renzetti.
Mr. Renzetti.
Yeah, is to take that, see that brush you got, is to snip the hairs off that brush and make it stubble, and then push that powder into the.
I do. When I first get started, pause it here, please. When I first get started, I have a short hair brush that I really grind it in to get a base. But I've also found coming in and touching up with that real long, soft brush gives a different look to it.
Right, right.
So I kind of like play around with it.
Right.
Okay. So now that we got our weathering, we're going to go ahead and put our shell and made it up to our frame. And as you can see, I put the headlight in this time. You may or may not come out that gray wire. So I used some surface mount LEDs that I got from modeltrainstuff.com. And what's nice with the ESU board is you don't have to worry about a resistor, because the headlight portion on this board, this 73100 board, has its a resistance in it for the LED lights. So that's one less thing we got to cram into our shell. I'll put our tank on, and we're going to go test it out. Sound, might want to cut back on the sound a little. Oh, I had found a fingerprint that I put in the weathering powder, so I had to fix it.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
Yeah.
If you could just pause this before we run this.
Yeah, pause it.
I just want to point out what you said earlier in regards to the differential of the paint scheme. In this photo, you can hardly see the difference in regards to the previous when it was on the round table. On the Lazy Susan, you can hardly see the difference, and you were so correct in the weathering, how it hides the imperfections. But, you know, in the effort of making it look, like you said, an engine that's been around the block a couple of times, basically it's so ugly it's pretty.
Yep.
So, you know, but I can see the difference. You can hardly tell the cab, you know, the differentiation in the colors between the cab and the body, shell body itself. So looks good.
I think we pulled it off, right?
I think you did. I think you can. Yeah, you definitely fooled some of the people some of the time.
Yeah. Let's listen. I don't think it's too loud. Hold on, we got more.
William Osino says, good job, Joe. I got to go, though. I hope that everybody enjoyed the show.
Thank you, William.
Thank you, William, for that.
So I think it came out really well. It runs super nice. I don't know if it's how it's going to come out on the video, but towards the end there, when it came around the curve, you heard a couple, it was skipping. That wasn't the video. That was the locomotive. I hit 3 dirty spots, and that's what I love about that decoder. It never stopped. It kept going, and it picked right up over the dirty spots, even though it cut out for a brief second. And that's why that decoder is awesome. I love them.
It sounded really good. I love the startup and the everything about it, the motor power sound, and just really realistic in pulling the coal cars.
Yeah. A lot of research I've done is a lot of the 60s where the 60Ms were on the middle division and all down in the coal areas on the Reading line. So I figured it'd look pretty good.
It was very good, Joe. I like the milling thing. I like the idea of the of doing the milling. I've never personally done it, but seeing it on the video, it doesn't seem that hard to do.
It's not. You know what it was? When I got the first ESU board and I put it on that SD50 a long time ago, and I was like, oh no, I don't want to do this. I don't have a mill. I don't know what to do. And, I just took my time and worked at it. And now this is my 3rd or 4th chassis that I've done. And I've gotten to the point where it's comfortable now. And it's really not that hard. You just got to have, your patience and take your time. And like I said, is make sure you test as you go. Because once you take that material off, you can't put it back on.
Yeah, true. Very true. Once it's cut away, it's certainly not going to be able to be glued back on. Mm-hmm. Stuff like that. That was pretty interesting. I enjoyed that because I think sometimes we get intimidated by things like that when you hear things like, well, it has to be milled, and you're like, oh, all right, I'm not even going to tackle that.
And the decaling, that's another one. That's another scary topic for people, is stripping a shell and repainting it. And that's people are petrified of. And yeah, once you do it a couple times and get through it, it's not that bad. Stripping that shell was very easy. And then laying down the paint and getting it to where you wanted it to put the decals on, it's just a process. Once you get your process and you know what steps you need to take and how you like to do it, and it's not as bad as everybody thinks.
And again, I think we go back to the prep work. I think what happens in this hobby is, I shouldn't say what I think happens. I think in this hobby, this is the type of hobby, this is not a video game.
Right.
See, the video game gives you instantaneous gratification.
Right.
The gratification comes later on, much, much later on. When you see, like when you see Miles Hale building his layout, and he tells you, I'm working on this and it's taking me months, and you're saying, some people would say, well, I know people in their mid-20s, early 30s would be months. I ain't got time for months. I got time for this, you know. But it's all the prep work, you know. It's all the you know, it's a bit time consuming. But this is my philosophy on this. I've always found that when life itself gets a little too pressurized, and you go into the layout, or like you said, you take a cup of coffee downstairs to your layout room and you start tinkering. It's never anything that you set out to do. It's always oh, let me just go down there and see what's that. And then you wind up doing something. Now, whatever is going on in your life at that time, or whatever happening in your life, you ever notice you come upstairs and then you go, you know, that situation that we're going through that we were thinking about doing? Well, I've decided this is what we're going to do. It always seems to clear the mind. It's like dental floss for the mind.
I like that. I like that, Bill.
You know, so you go downstairs and you lose yourself in prepping the shell, you know, dumping the alcohol in there. And as the alcohol is soaking, you're prepping other things, getting the decals through your whatever file system you may have, you know, and you say, this is what I want to do, or you have that idea. I give you a perfect example. I saw a video by Kathy Millette, and she did a thing on bricks. And I went out and I purchased these off eBay. They're 100 bricks in here. And I got these terracotta plates from Home Depot. And she gave me this great idea. So you're going to do it, but it's prep work. So you had to go to Home Depot, you know, how to get the terracotta plates, how to order the bricks, you know, and it's all that prep work until you finally get down to the thing of doing it. And as you're doing it, it's in steps, and you're having fun doing it. It's not a video game. Right. Absolutely. Northern Star Railroad, Dwight says, my experience with decals was with poor quality decals, as they tore easily, but high quality decals sure do work better. And you're absolutely right, Dwight. You know what I hate, Dwight? I hate when I've had decals in a fold, and one day I said, you know, I'm going to use this, and they dried out. Yep. So when I applied the solvent on it, they kind of disappeared. I hate that. Yeah. I hate when that happens. So you got to use it pretty quickly. Yeah, you get what you pay for. Yeah, you know. You want quality, you have to pay quality. That's right. If you want to get that 69 cents a yard rug, well, that's what you're going to get. You know, it's like going to buy sushi in the real sushi joint, or going to your neighborhood Amico station and getting it from him. I know. Get what you pay for. Right. But very enlightening, Joe. Very enlightening as always. Thank you. And we, just to give you guys out there in the community a heads up, Joe and Bill Baronic, the track planner, have conspired to come up with a working prototypical operations show that they're working on to do. And basically what they're going to do, we're going to be using Joe's layout as a live set to do a whole gamut of operations, basically, you know, from soup to nuts, trying to make it as palatable to understand, from car cards, timetables, fast clocks, and whatever. So they've been working on that. Yours truly will be moderating it, because we have to have some levity and some fun. And I'm just that kind of knucklehead guy that way. Because these two guys, when they get together, the track planner, Bill Baronic and Joe, very, very serious. Very, very serious. I try not to, but sometimes Joe, you have a passion for the hobby and a passion for what you do, and it comes through. And it's very refreshing, and it's very, very, very nice. You know, it's not, you know. I can't wait for this to come together and bring it out to you, because I like operations. I'm big into, you know, doing local switching and car cards and waybills and switch lists. I like emulating my prototype, so I really get into it. And there's a lot of great information.
You know, if you're just running that 4x8, I think myself and Mr. the track planner, we're going to show you how you can take that 4x8 and start running some realistic operations, you know, and just experimenting. And I think that's, once you get that appetite, and it's going to consume it. It's really a fun facet of the hobby, I believe.
I think it's like I think after you guys, work through it, I think in the first show, I think it's like taking a match to dry grass. I think it's going to ignite, and I think it's going to set it on fire. And I think people have a better understanding of what's going on, and and the prototypical operation. And we got a lot planned for you, on YouTube Model Builders. You guys may think that we're sitting on some beach somewhere drinking Mai Tais with umbrellas in our drinks, but we're actually working back here behind the scenes to get these shows. As you can see, Joe does a lot of hard work in preparing those video so that it can accompany the show as we do this. He puts a lot of effort into this, as well as John and Andy and Ralph and Miles and all the guys, Chris. They all do a lot of they do the heavy lifting here. I'm the guy that's the talking head here, and I'm the guy, doing all the talking. But these guys are always behind the scenes coming up with new ideas and new things. And that's exactly what we want to do. We want to just keep moving forward with it and, just keep propelling this into whatever we can come up with and think about, because it's for the community. So, yeah. So, Joe, thank you. Let's see if we have anything. It says here, Northern Star Railroad Lines. Dwight, thanks, Joe, for a very informative show.
Thank you, Dwight. I appreciate that.
And John Dilly says, great show, Joe. Thanks.
Thank you, John.
Railroad Line, Dwight. Thanks, Bill. And the Silent Southern Gentleman. That would be you, John. Jerry Smith, for at least a few of us operators, is what you do after the layout is built to keep you from getting bored before you can start building a new layout. Yes, we were talking. You're absolutely right, Jerry. We were talking to Chris Healy last night in a team meeting, and Chris was telling us about a guy who built a full basement layout, HO scale, scenic, wired, the whole 9 yards. And after it was done, it took him a year to do, and he operated for 2 years, tore it down, and moved to a new house. And he's in the process of building a new layout. Apparently, he travels a lot and moves to location to location. And he's taking it that he says this one will only be up for 3 years. So imagine that. But you're absolutely right. From getting bored before you can start building a new layout. You know exactly what you mean. But thank you. Joe, thanks again.
Thank you for having me.
All the time, Joe. It's always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. So that's one of the things we're looking to do in the near future is with Joe and Bill, a.k.a. the track planner, Baronic, in doing prototypical operations. Don't forget this Thursday, May 17th, Thursday evening, we're going to have Johnny's Model Train Talk. That's where you, the community, can join in. Look on our Google Plus page on YouTube Model Builders to see for the link to get in on the live discussion. You're more than welcome. It's what? Facebook, and also Facebook as well, so that you can join in the live discussion. It's not limited to, to anybody's special on the group. And it's, if you get in, how many people are we allowed on the chat?
50.
10. So if you right, 10 on the panel like you're seeing now, but unlimited on the chat. So you can come in and share whatever your project you're working on or whatever you'd like to talk about in model railroading. Also on May 26th, that's May 22nd, excuse me. That's the following Tuesday. That's Ralph Renzetti, a.k.a. the Mudfather, will be doing his work from workbench to mainline weathering program, and Ralph is pretty good. In fact, Ralph is very good at what he does, and very informative and very helpful in giving information out. He'll be doing his weathering. What's that? Yeah, pizza for me. See, what you guys don't understand is John's talking to Joe and I. This new production thing that we got, we can hear him, but you can't. So he's throwing instructions at us and making comments. So if we go, what? It's not, you know. And anyway, what we're doing also on the end of this is the end of this month, we're premiering a new show. It's called Who's Big Bill Talking To? And what we're going to be doing on that. And hopefully we're going to get Lionel Strand in on that show. He said that he would be willing to do it. I sent out contact to get him. Lionel, if you're watching this, you know, I guess I just put the pressure on, unfortunately. But
yeah, he's for those of you who don't know, he does the AML podcast.
Yes, which you know, A Model Is Life, which Joe, our good friend Joe Desmond, is going to be on.
Yes,
he was invited to be on Lionel's podcast. And we've had a few other YouTube models builders on the live on his podcast. We had JD, you know, former editor of our e-magazine, and he was on his show. So I figured since he's having all our guys on his show, we'd invite him on this new format, this new show. And you know,
he's a great guy. I like him.
I do too. I do too. He's a lot of fun, great sense of humor, and knows a lot about the hobby. So we're going to keep it interesting and on topic, I hope. If not, we're just going to have a good time with it. But it's a new show we've developed, and we're going to premiere it the 29th. Hopefully in June. I have another guest lined up. He hasn't, you know, he said yes, but we're going to finalize it and firm it up. So I don't want to say who it is, but it's going to be pretty interesting. And we're going to try to get interesting people on this. Like I said earlier, it's not going to be a dedicated show every month, month to month. It's going to be, you know, when we can, and if a little bit more relaxed, not so formal. We'll also have the Q&A involved in it too, so you guys can ask away a ton of questions. But we hope to do something new and different with that. So, you know, that's what we're hoping for. So again, Joe, I want to thank you very much. Joe's YouTube channel is Central Jersey Conrail in N-Scale. Check it out. He's got some good operating videos up there, and some other great techniques in weathering, and more than a little bit more expanded on this than he's what he's done on this channel. So thanks again, Joe, for being a part of this.
You know it. Thank you, Bill.
And thank you, John, for being the director extraordinaire here.
You're welcome. I'll turn the mic on so everybody can hear me this time.
You turned the mic on?
My mic.
Oh, he did. So there he is. There's the man behind the curtain pulling all the levers.
And cracking the corny jokes.
Now, do we have to go get the witch's broom? I don't know. But anyway, thank you guys for being a part of the YouTube Model Builders Show tonight, Into the Locomotive Shop with our good friend Joe Desmond. You guys take care out there, because without you, we don't have a show. We're just talking to dead air. So thank you for being a part of this. Take care. God bless, and we'll see you on the radio.